Hi guys, it's Lucy. So today I wanted to talk about two books, specifically about subways, coincidentally, um, that I read recently and really enjoyed. So both are translated works. So if you are a fan of Japan or Japanese literature, this is definitely your cup of tea. So the first one is another book by one of my favorite authors, Haruki Murakami. It's called Underground, and this book is quite different than all of the other Murakami works that I've read or heard about, which are fiction or nonfiction. This one is actually, fiction or short stories. This book is actually nonfiction. It is a combination of 42 different interviews that Haruki Murakami had done himself, where he was the interviewer. And the event in question was a terrorist attack that happened in the Tokyo subway stations back in 1995, where sarin gas was used. So this was a major event. 13 people died, and thousands of people were impacted. And this is something, honestly, I myself haven't really heard of, but when I asked my parents, they were very well aware of it, and that having been covered as a major news event back in China when it first occurred. So this book was originally published in two parts in Japan back in 98 and 97, and this is the English version that we have now that was first published in 99. Murakami himself, as the interviewer, with his team of assistants, they tracked down about 140 people who were confirmed to have been there, and 40% of those consented to an interview. The existence of this book alone is amazing, considering the level of emotional impact for the interviewees themselves. And what's amazing is that Murakami not only interviews the victims and the innocent commuters who happen to be on the subway lines where the attacks had taken place. He also interviewed some of the people who were part of the cult and their experiences, with the people who were responsible for the attack and all the psychology behind that. So there are so many things that I underlined, but I feel like if I read it out loud, so many things could be taken out of context. This is something that is really meant to be read all together, but with a very obviously open mindset. A lot of it is in the words of the people themselves. So Murakami takes a very removed sort of position within this book. He only gives an introduction for each interviewee at the beginning. It's about a blurb, about one page, and then there is an afterword where he shares some of his thoughts. I find this to be an amazing piece of work because it documents such chaos and confusion in such a human way, where it is something that doesn't make sense on its own at all. There's no logic to it, but it's akin to war, an act of terrorism, and to be able to put that in words that captures the experience of so many people, and also the things and the psychology and all the little individual stories that had led up to different groups of thinking, and then the experiences of people who suffer through it, the way that each of them process differently and go about living lives. And you think about today, if you visit Japan, you go on the subway, it could be some of those people, they're living. It's still a very cohesive society, a single picture, and yet there's so much behind that. And to understand the psyche, this is where the Japanese psyche comes in. It's a very worthwhile read, in my opinion. Not particularly cheerful, but fascinating because each person is named by their own name. And this is where I think a lot of the interviewees had pulled out, because Murakami had insisted that they use their own name, their more or less actual age, and also their occupation. And in a lot of instances, he talks about the region of Japan that they're from. So they are identifiable, real people. And that, I think, is a huge deal for Japanese people willing to share their stories in this way. So this is a book that not only I think the author would want to put out there in the world, but also the people who took the time to dig into their memories of this like horrible past and recount what had happened and trying to make sense of it and communicating that to the world, basically publicly. It's amazing. One of the main, I think, things that really, this is from the words of one of the people who, he was a victim who was on one of the subway lines, and what he said was interesting. He said logic doesn't really have a strong role in people's motivations. I think that needs to be kept in mind as we read something like this. It's more of I think that's what makes it very humane, the way that Murakami is portraying and giving the space of people telling their own stories. You can see that a lot of it is so idealistic. It is so there's just, it's not like it's not that this happened and then that happened and so it makes sense for us to do this. It's not like that at all. And it's hard to not see things as so black and white. So I think this book puts a lot of things in perspective. So Underground, highly recommend. And on a slightly more, it's not cheerful at all, actually. Both of them are a little bit somber. So this book is called Tokyo Ueno Station, and it is by Miri, and I picked this book up at the Strand. The reason I saw it, not only because the color, I'm so attracted by colorful things. The cover itself, I thought it was going to be a cheerful short story type of book, but in reality, it is not. So at the back, reading just the synopsis, it says, Kazu is dead. That's how it starts. So basically, we see Ueno Station, Tokyo society through the eyes of a character who eventually realized he passed away. And what I think is most interesting about this book is not anything specifically personal. So the narrator himself sounds quite removed. He's talking about homelessness in Tokyo. He's talking about history of Japan in terms of society changes over the years. So Kazu, the main character, he was born in, I think 1933. So he started working and becoming like an adult basically in post-war Japan, full-on boomer sort of generation mode. And what he mentions, I think, was most interesting about homelessness in Japan, himself having left his family to become one of those living on the streets, is that it's different from what I see in at least our current day Western culture, where a lot of it is driven by mental disorders and poverty, obviously, but also drugs. In Japan, at least the way that this book portrays, a lot of it has to deal with shame and guilt. So some of these people, they have homes, they have left families on their own volition. So it's not sort of a forced upon them type of situation. And the way that he talks about how the city and the government deals with homelessness was interesting. There are even mention of events that I actually looked up on the news, because there's there were a lot of cases of violence against homelessness by youths, committed by youths, and we're talking like not just throwing stones, but literally deaths, very violent things, which I found very surprising. And this is something that I think, at least here in Western society, we don't actually see that very often. There were a lot of these cases that popped up in various parts of Japan, where the perpetrators were juveniles, and this was around 2000-ish. I'm not sure if things have improved since then, or what the social dialogue is, but a lot of this is very interesting. So one of the in the beginning, I think I was just standing in the store and reading this. This is what caught my attention. This is the type of thing, if you like this, I think a lot of it is very similar. It gives you a lot of context and background to society. So Ueno Station, the gateway to the north, during which post-war economic boom, young people from the northeast had taken overnight trains en masse to search for work in the capital, and Ueno was the place they disembarked. And when they went back home for the holidays with only the bags they could carry, Ueno was where they caught their trains. This is very interesting for me. When I visited Tokyo myself, my friends and I stayed at an Airbnb, and Ueno Station was where we were closest to. So we obviously were just following Google Maps. We have no idea where is what, or the historical significance of any of that is. So reading this book is like armchair traveling. So both these books, if you enjoyed Roads to Sada by Alan Booth that I talked about earlier, and interested in just what a different culture might be like, I'm guessing it's a foreign culture for you because you're listening to me talk in English. So so for the holidays, if you're not going anywhere, I recommend these. Have a good day, guys. Bye.